Right, and we want to talk more about the situation and why they're protesting both for and against China. We have an expert, a Cal State East Bay history professor, to talk to us about U.S.-China relations. Nancy Park on the line. Good morning.
Hi.
Hi there. Oh, and let me just say that we're showing a double box with what's going on at APEC in San Francisco, while Will Tran is out there looking at the demonstrators that are for and against China. So since you're an expert on U.S.-China relations, let's talk a little bit about why these protesters want President Xi to see them.
Well, I wasn't able to hear some of the sound, but some of the issues that they're talking about are the issues of Taiwan, the issues of human rights, the issues of press freedoms, and these are all problems that the Chinese people have with the government, which is more and more authoritarian in many ways.
Yeah, we've heard Will and others categorize the relationship between the U.S. and China, and this meeting particularly, as being frosty. For those that are maybe coming to this subject for the first time, explain why that is.
That is a really good question. I think that, so my time in China starts in the 1990s, where the relationships were warming up. This was after Panda diplomacy. This was after Nixon went to China. And they've gotten, they got progressively welcoming and warm until about 2015. And they've gotten worse since then. And I think there's been some provocations on both sides that have caused the relationship to worsen.
And, well, one of those is, remember the spy balloon that was...
Oh, right, that floated across the U.S.
That's been only about 10 months ago. That was pretty recently.
Right. Well, from the Chinese perspective, one of the biggest provocations was Nancy Pelosi's visit to Taiwan. Because from the Chinese government perspective, Taiwan is a rogue province, and Beijing is the only legitimate government. And by visiting Taiwan, the Chinese government felt like this was an infringement on their territorial integrity. And the spy balloon, from the American perspective, for obvious reasons, the United States does not want to be spied on.
And don't forget, we saw when they both arrived, President Biden and President Xi, who was there? Gavin Newsom. The governor just visited China.
Well, to me, that's a very positive sign, because the more that there is this kind of engagement, the better it is for the relationship. I think a lot of the problems there are real problems with the relationship, don't get me wrong. But I think that a lot of the recent tensions have been caused by overblown rhetoric, unnecessary provocations. For example, calling the COVID virus, calling it the Kung flu. Chinese people have access to Western media, and they see this and they're insulted.
And we heard the president earlier, President Biden, talking about his goal in this meeting today, and APEC in general, was to bring the relationship between the U.S. and China back to normal. Those were his words, trying to get communication going again. What do you think would have to happen for that to happen? What do you think it's possible?
I think it is possible. The U.S. and China have a $700 billion trade relationship. So there are a lot of forces that would like to have better relations. I also think that if you go back to the 70s and 80s, when the modern U.S.-China relationship started, there were serious problems then. Bigger problems, more overwhelming challenges than there are now. I think what would need to happen is, the first step is what they're doing right now, which is greater communication. And that's the only way you can address some of these challenges, which are real and are serious.
And it's interesting that after most heads of state meetings, you know how they come out and they have a joint news conference, that they're already ahead of time said, when we're done, we're going to have separate news conferences from separate locations, not together at all. How do you read that?
That is not good.
Yeah.
I think that one of the things about the U.S.-China relationship is it's not just about the U.S. and China. It's about China's relationship with its domestic audience and the U.S. relationship with its domestic audience. So there's a certain amount of posturing that comes through on both sides, in addition to any real achievements or problems that have happened in the actual meeting. So it's difficult to read until we see how things unfold a little later.
Well, but it's interesting that by all accounts, China's president tried to stack the deck along that route by busing in pro-China demonstrators from around the country.
That's what I'm talking about. Playing to the China audience. There's propaganda, a lot of propaganda in China. And if this meeting were happening in China, there would be no demonstrators. I mean, no anti-Biden demonstrators, no anti-US demonstrators, because the Chinese government would have made sure that those people were not there. What the Chinese see, just the average Chinese person sees from a scene like you've just shown is a country in chaos. And this is something, China is playing up to this. When I say that there are these issues and that there should be greater communication, this is not saying that living in China is easy or that China is always right. But I do think that the Chinese government is going to use these scenes for their benefit because they are playing to their domestic audience as well.
Okay, so actually they don't need to see that sea of red and the supporters pro-China seeing like what we're seeing in San Francisco right now. This is protests about a variety of issues, but that helps them as well. They want to show that like things are out of control, whereas here in China things are very orderly and safe.
Exactly.
Interesting. Well, lastly then, just the mere fact that the President of the United States said he wanted to bring relations back to normal, and the fact that the President of China, Xi Jinping, agreed to this meeting, does that mean to you that they're also hoping to reestablish relations as well?
I would say that that is the plan. There are a lot of interests in the United States, business interests, for example, and in China that really require a healthy relationship. There are issues like the climate change agreement that just happened. There are issues of discussing the future of Taiwan. All of these are better solved if all the concerned parties have a place at the table. Having said that, these issues are extremely complicated. There's a deep level of disagreement and mistrust, and this all has to be worked through issue by issue over a long period of time.
Okay.
Fascinating. Professor Park, thank you so much.
Thanks for putting it. I mean, talking is better than not talking in the end, so that's what's happening today.
I agree.
Okay. Thank you so much.